Welcome to part 2 of VERTEX 104. Before we continue, let's explore what we at iVersal refer to as the VERTEX Matryoshka principle. It describes how content items nest within clip files, similar to stacking Matryoshka dolls. And while content items refer to the what of our display, clips add transformational properties such as the positioning on the canvas, the where and how. And finally, time-related playback properties are then stored within a clip container that impacts the content's arrangement on the timeline, the when. Grasping these basics will boost your compositing skills. Now, let's proceed with the class. Let's take a look at the Project Explorer. You'll notice that clips are not immediately visible in all view, but fear not, they can all be accessed through the Clips Manager. Click on Clips and you'll see that each clip is labeled with the name of its assigned content, except for clip number 2, which has no content assigned. Remember when we deleted content number 2? By zooming in on clip container number 2 on our timeline, you'll observe that nothing is rendered because the container is empty due to the deletion of its content earlier. Instead of a content's thumbnail, all we see is a checkered target field. Generally, in VERTEX, any checkered target field is ideal for drag-and-drop operations. Let's put this feature to good use by creating and incorporating some generative content. Access the context menu of the Content Manager with a right-click and choose Add Generic Content and Text. Next, simply drag the text content and drop it into the target area of our clip container. And this workflow lets you easily assign new content to existing clip containers. Select to inspect the clip container and go to the inspector. Here you can enable or disable the entire clip container, which can also be done by pressing E on your keyboard, E for enable. When you disable the clip container, a little icon appears with a crossed out eye that screams, "Hey, I'm invisible." When inspecting a clip container, you'll notice that it also conveniently stores all the properties of its associated clip, such as opacity, volume, or transform settings. To change a clip's position, you can just click on any value field and drag your mouse in and out, or double-click on it and enter a desired value. That way you can rotate your clip or scale in and out. And if you don't like any of the changes, you can reset the entire category with the reset button over here. But if you're asking yourself, hey, where do I actually edit my text content? It's the perfect time to remember the Matryoshka principle and go back to the text content itself, focus it in the inspector, and edit the text here in the text field. If you type something like hello and confirm with enter, the text changes immediately, which allows for dynamic generative text content. Let's move the playhead to clip container 3 and click on it to select it. See how you can also change the transformational properties in the render editor window. Just click on it to move it around, or drag the edges to stretch it or scale it even. I'm going to reset that for now because I want to talk to you about scaling. Remember, everything here is rendered in real time. So if you scale down that clip to, let's say, 50%, some scaling pixelation artifacts might appear. They become especially visible in the full screen renderer when switching from preview to full screen with the keyboard shortcut Ctrl F. And here you can see that the scale down artifacts become quite visible in the output. So press Ctrl F again to exit this window and go to the Project Explorer. Select the actual content asset because a solution for that cannot be found on clip container level. Here in the content settings, you can enable texture filtering that can be applied to smooth over still images. However, texture filtering uses more system resources, so you should always rely on your content creators to deliver your content assets in the correct dimensions. Now that texture filtering is applied, let's go back to the full screen renderer by pressing Ctrl F and compare the results. Alright, now that we discussed the basic properties of a clip, let's do some actual compositing with multiple texture layers. Go to the library to get some more stock content. And I really like this video glamour loop here. This time I add it to my project with a double click. And once the import is processed, I'm going to drag the content item into my sequence and have a clip and a clip container automatically created here. Next, I'll grab the clip container of the Vertex logo and slide it on top of my glamour loop. By default, the snapping magnet is enabled, so the timing of both clip containers can be aligned with ease. Et voila! Now we have a little composition of two textures. The upper track in this layering hierarchy is always on top by default. Of course, you can change that default, as it is the case with pretty much any defaults in Vertex. But for now, let's work with the natural order of things. Instead, I'm going to add another sequence track below with a click on this Add Track button here on the right and move my glamour loop down there so it serves as a background to the textures in the above layers. Let's add some generative content, a gradient maybe, to be sandwiched between background and foreground. Since the default Full HD size of this generative texture would cover the entire background, we need to change it. Changes like these can only be applied on content level, so I need to inspect the content item to change the texture size here. Let's give it 500 and 500 pixels and drag that gradient onto the timeline. Of course, you can also scale the gradient in the clip container properties, but the proper workflow demands working with correct dimensions on content level. And this cannot be done by inspecting the clip container. You'll need to go to the smallest Matryoshka doll, the content item itself. And if you want to change the color or other properties of your generative assets, you could do that here as well. Every clip has got two playback sync modes. The first one is by default playback sync, which means that the clip plays in sync with the sequence, as can be seen when comparing the transport counter and the content's timecode. Oh, let me disable the audio monitor real quick. As soon as I hit the space bar to pause the sequence's transport, the playback of my content pauses as well. However, Vertex lets me play my video independently from the counter of my playback if I switch the playback sync mode to FreeSync. Now, even though my sequence transport is paused, the content itself is running freely in a loop. As long as the playhead is positioned over a clip container, it will keep on playing according to its transport mode settings. I can also change the transport mode from loop to once, which means after playing once, the clip pauses at its last frame. I'm going to zoom out a little with the mouse wheel and the control key. Now, to extend the length of a clip container, you can click and drag on its right edge and trim it like so. Let's switch back to playback sync. And you see those little lines here. They mark the original length of the content. Now, if you extend or shorten the clip container, you'll notice how the length and the end time change in the inspector. If the clip container's transport mode was still set to loop, each of these little bars would mark the loop point at which the clip's content would start over from its first frame. But since we've changed the clip's transport mode to once, Vertex will keep continuously rendering the last frame of the clip for the remaining duration of the clip container. And that's why it's so important of understanding Vertex's Matryoshka principle and knowing the difference between clip container and actual clip. Anyhow, what's a use case for this? Well, let's say we need to play a video and have it pause on its last frame, which is being used as a still image as part of a compositing layer. Well, this is how that's being done. Other transport mode options include once reset, similar to once mode, but with the difference that the still image resets to the first frame of the clip, play it backwards in reverse once, or reverse in a loop, or ping pong it, which means forward and backwards. But please note that this mode only works with hap and notch videos. Now, if you set the transport mode back to loop and extend the clip container for the duration of the entire sequence, you can have the whole sequence dedicated to an infinite loop. That is because by default, every playback provider, such as our sequence, is set to auto-repeat. So if I go to the very end and press play, you'll notice how the playhead jumps back to the start. And now my 10-minute sequence can serve as an independent loop in the larger arrangement of my whole show. This becomes a powerful feature when we talk about layering and nesting sequences, but let's get into that later. The last thing I want to show you in this section is that you can access the context menu of a clip container and reset it to the original clip length. Cues! What a powerful feature to program and control your show. Let's add a cue at the current position of the playhead by pressing the keyboard shortcut M. Now cue 1 is instantly created and already selected to be inspected. It's already enabled, of course, and when you disable it, you'll see how it gets grayed out in the timeline. The next property sets its cue ID number, but you can give it a custom label too, which will appear in the timeline instead of its ID number. Let's say this is where our show starts, and this label, or down here the note field, would later on help guiding the operator or director of your show. Speaking of which, you can also give a cue increased visibility to mark important points in time, if you want it to be noticed by a director or in case a customer is present. Making it a dedicated show cue will highlight it on the timeline. You see that? Each cue is assigned a special functionality mode, which can be found here in the drop-down. By default, it's set to continue, allowing you to program scripts to be executed at that point in time while the playhead passes by cool and softly like the girl from Ipanema. There's also pause cues on which the playhead pauses, stop cues which make the playhead go back to the beginning of the timeline, and wait cues which make the playhead wait for a desired amount of time. Jump cues have the playhead jump to a new position in time or to another cue, which could be the next cue, previous cue, etc. You'll find a detailed description to each cue in the manual. Please let me remind you to read the manual. Alright, let's make some more cues. You can also click the Add Cue button in the Playback Editor window, putting cue number 2 at the position of the playhead. Let's go to the beginning of these 3 clip containers and add a cue with another workflow, access the context menu with a right-click, and add a cue from there at the position of the timeline. Let's go to the end of these clip containers and add one last cue here, but this time using the drop-down next to the Add Cue button. Here you can select the default cue mode for adding. Let's make it a jump cue. Jump to cue. In the inspector, you can make it jump to any cue in the timeline. I'm gonna set it to cue number 3. And you can also have a cue jump the playhead to a specified time by setting the mode to a jump to time cue. Jump cues are perfect solutions for looping regions of your timeline. The playhead will cycle continuously between the jump cue and its target on an earlier point in time. Now we see here for the first time the orange counter in the Playback Editor. If I press play, it counts down the remaining time until the next cue, which is a great tool supervising the run of your show. If you try this workflow yourself with the same sample content and you have trouble looping it neatly, I'm going to show you some possible solutions. Let's do it properly and reset all the clip lengths of these 3 containers. Next, we'll make sure that the cues are positioned exactly at the first and last frame of our content with the help of Vertex's snapping feature. And because of the smaller file size, all test content is shipped in an H.264 codec. Let's transcode that to HAP real quick. I'm going to fast forward now because I've explained that workflow already. Now that's a way to ensure that the loop points of this playback are really neat and clean, and now that glamour loop should do its name justice and give us a seamless loop between the edit points. Anyway, regarding the jump cue, you can also specify the number of times you want the jump to be executed by setting a jump count. The default is 0, which means infinite jumps. But you can, for example, say jump only once and then never again, letting the playhead ignore the jump at the second repeat. And that way you can program highly complex playback situations. For instance, you can also jump to a pause cue. I'm going to move this cue over here and change it to a pause cue. And now the playhead jumps and pauses immediately at the hello text content, waiting for you, the operator, to press play again. If you want to set a fixed duration for that pause and automate the resume play command, you can put a wait cue here. Let's give it a wait time of 3 seconds and 0 frames. And now the playhead waits and the cue counter switches to counting down our wait time in red numbers. After the wait is over, it switches back to the orange display of the remaining time until next cue. Another cool thing about cues is they can be accessed in a sequence cue sheet. Let's say all these cues represent different scenes in your production. I'm gonna reset the cues to a default continue mode. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 scenes on our timeline marked by 4 cues. Next, open the sequence cue sheet from the main menu under Windows and select the sequence cue sheet. It can serve as a clear list for directors as well as a simplified transport control, allowing you to go to next and previous cues analog to those little buttons down here in the sequence editor. It also allows you to pick any cue from that list and go to it instantly. When, for instance, the director says, hey, can we rehearse scene 1 again? Let's go to cue 1. Go to cue 2, go to cue 3, and so on and so on. Notice that the current cue time is highlighted green and that the next cue to be loaded is marked orange. You can also temporarily preload every clip container at a cue's position by pressing the L button. And then, if we fade to that cue now, we'll have a seamless transition since all the content has been preloaded into Vertex's rendering pipeline. As I mentioned before, you can go to the previous and next cue with the help of these buttons or use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus left and right arrow keys. You can select any cue ID here in this dropdown and click on the Go to Selected Cue button right next to it. Next, we have the Fade to Cue button for smooth transitions between timeline jumps. Notice how the playhead remains grayed out at its position before the fade jump, like the ghost of a departed lingering on. By the way, a quick keyboard shortcut for the Fade to Time feature is hold down the Control key and click on any point in the timeline. And the last cue relevant button here allows you to scroll your timeline to the selected cue without interfering with the running playback. Let's say you want to inspect your timeline at cue number 4. While the playback is running, clicking this button scrolls the view to the selected cue instead of moving the playhead to it. Now, I'm going to leave it at that because transitions is going to be the final topic of this class. So let's talk transitions. Let's go back to the gradient that I have resized to full HD. And if you grab the glamour loop and drag it onto the same track and slide it over the other clip container, you see that little line creating a triangle? Well, at this point, Vertex creates an automatic transition, dissolve or crossfade. Ain't that sweet? For isolated clip containers on individual tracks, you can access the context menu and create an automated fade from here. Either choose your desired fade time or select the default times from the menu. And now there's a smooth fade instead of a hard cut. Of course, the whole thing also works for fade outs, like so. By default, every transition is a cross dissolve, but Vertex wouldn't be Vertex if that couldn't be customized as well. Over here, we can choose a wipe file for a clip container's transitions. Instead of a basic dissolve, you'll have tons of creative options to choose from, like this nice cloudy texture. If you don't like any of the presets, take a look over here. And remember, every checkered area is a target field. This allows you to drag your custom content and drop it into the target field. Next, select Wipe Content in the dropdown. That's the wipe file. Let's see how it processes the Vertex logo. Woo-wee! Yeah, that's about it. Feel free to check out all the other properties like the fade in and fade out times that can also be accessed here in the inspector. And please read the manual for further honing of your content and compositing skills. Thanks for watching. Class dismissed.